Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined today by my brother, the Gritty Broman, behind the camera. How are you, Brent?
I am well. Thank you.
All right. Well, today I'm going to kind of continue this discussion I had about back pain. And one of the things that I mentioned regarding back pain, I talked about the McKenzie method and some other things that I did, like getting a standing desk. I got a lot of questions about the standing desk, like things that I hadn't considered that I think is good to go over. One of the things I said I felt like was one of the biggest issues that caused me all that pain was my time spent sitting. And I virtually refused to sit for like 2 years as I healed my back. Okay. So I want to talk about that. And it's interesting. I got a comment on YouTube that I love by a guy named Tom Masters. He's some kind of physical therapist maybe, or doctor or something, but he said, or maybe he's just had the same issues I've had. Yeah. I don't really know. He left a comment, and I'm going to do a little digging on what he said. He said, "Great episode and good advice. Your particular back problem is very common today. We refer to it as disc derangement, and a lot of the people with this problem will benefit from the McKenzie method. It sounds like you also had dynamic instability, otherwise known as motor control dysfunction. This happens when you have chronic pain as you did. Congrats on working through your pain naturally. One exercise you should consider adding to your routine that you didn't mention is Pallof presses. They work the multifidus muscle, which is an important back stabilizer and one that is affected when you have chronic pain." So I haven't looked up the Pallof press. I'll look into that. The McKenzie method has been a game changer. And then, like I said, not sitting all the time has been huge. So on today's podcast, I wanted to dive into the sitting issue because I just don't think people realize the negative impact that sitting has on your health and your well-being. You just assume, it's fine. And our culture is, especially Western culture, is so wrapped up in sitting. It's how we roll. When you go to Japan, like I did for 2 years, in our apartments, for example, we didn't have a chair. There wasn't a chair. Well, there was like a chair that you could sit to a table with if you wanted to in some apartments. But there was tatami mats, and you sat on the floor. And you had a little table on the floor. And in the wintertime, when it was cold, you have a little heating element under the table that plugs in the wall, and then a little blanket that comes off the table. And you slide up to that, and you're warm under the table. But the top of you is kind of freezing cold because it's snow and icy outside. A lot of times we didn't run heat in the apartments, especially because buildings and infrastructure are really old in Japan, at least in some of the remote areas I was in. And so there is no furnace. There's no central heating. So a lot of times they just have those kerosene type heaters, white gas heaters that are in the house. You light a flame and it smells like kerosene in your apartment.
Lovely.
But that took money to run, and
you're poor.
We were poor. So we usually just plugged in the heating element underneath the little table. But you sat on the floor. That's the point. What shocked me when I first arrived in Japan, of course, was the toilet. The toilet was just a hole in the floor. I was just talking to a buddy yesterday who's like talking about taking a dump in the woods. He's like, I got to find a log and I want to sit over I'm like, squat.
Yeah.
Squat and take a dump.
But then he gets tired.
But then he's like, he couldn't squat. He couldn't sit in a deep squat or a comfortable squat. It's pretty silly since it's one of the basic functions that the human body should do is squat to take a dump. That's how we are. That's how the body has evolved. And here in America, it's pretty sad when someone can't actually poop without a log. That's a red flag.
It is.
It's an alarm bell.
Pooping in the woods is my favorite thing. It's so nice. You take your pants off. You can take all the time that you want. Maybe you want to stand up, shake it off a little bit, relax. It's the best.
I don't need to take my pants off. I'm quite skilled at keeping my pants on.
Oh, well, I mean, just like, why would you want that added stress?
Why would I want to take my shoes off and stuff to get my pants off? Like, why would you want that added work? You just drop your drawers, go.
You can do that. I'm just saying, like, I like the peace of mind, Brian. How much is a peace of mind worth to you?
Look, I guess I'm more limber and flexible than you.
I'll give you that. You're Mr. Limber compared to me. Toe touches scare me. But I'm just saying.
I can see it being liberating.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, if you can take your pants off while you use a regular toilet, why not?
Okay. Well, moving on.
For those at home,
Moving
take
on.
your pants off the next time. That's why they have those hooks. When you go inside of like a public restroom.
Oh, really?
It's to put your
It's
pants
not
off.
where your jacket goes.
No, it's your pants. Silly.
All right, folks. So anyway, squatting is important. They have those squatty potty toilets nowadays where you can actually sit.
Go look at the commercials.
Yeah, the reason for that is because the bowels and the rectum, and all that stuff opens up so you can actually have a proper...
There's a muscle that's basically a rubber band that's kind of holding on to that last little bit of...
feces.
Yes.
Stool.
There you go.
Excrement. Basically, you need to open that up by sitting in a squat position, and your body eliminates better.
It's the final kink in the system.
Yeah.
And if you're not, and it's literally a matter of inches. It's like your knees coming up towards your chest, like 3 or 4 inches.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a whole lot.
The point was, when I was in Japan, you had the toilet, and that was just a hole. And so...
Did you have like a bicycle handle you could hold on to?
No,
or
there's
like,
nothing.
How big is this hole?
So when I first got there, of course, being born and raised in the United States, I had pretty much lost my ability to do an effective squat at 19 years old.
Yeah.
And so when I first went in there and they're like, yeah, you got to squat to go to the bathroom, like I couldn't squat. So I went in there, and every time I got down low enough, I'd like have to fall over. My legs would be burning. Like when I got down into the squat position, I had to raise my heels off the floor and go up on my toes. Well, how can you relax?
You can't.
When you're like that, it's really tough. And so
did you get like a rope and tie it around something and just hold on to it?
The toilet's just kind of a hole, and it's oblong shaped. There's a pipe that comes up, and I grab the pipe and then squat.
Hold on for dear life.
Yeah, but the problem is that's actually using it backwards. And so when you go and drop your load backwards in the oblong porcelain toilet, when it flushes, the water goes the wrong way and it splashes the stuff out of the little hole if you're not careful. And so when you use it backwards, you can make a mess, when you flush. And so I learned that after the first time. And so, yeah, there was really nothing to hold on to.
So no one gave you a breakdown? They just said, best of luck?
I got to tell you, it was intimidating the first time.
It should
When
be.
I had an apartment that didn't have a Western toilet in it, I was like, whoa, how am I going to do this? Or if you're at a restaurant or you're someplace where you got to go. To me, it's so much cleaner because you're not sitting on some seat that other people have touched and sat on. You don't touch anything. You just go in, drop your drawers,
the Western
do your thing.
society for the whole butt-to-butt thing, like...
It's creepy.
It is.
You can have your toilet protector and throw that on there. But anyway,
it's too much work.
My point was, it was an eye-opener when I saw how well Japanese people just fluidly could squat, go to the bathroom, do their thing, and us Westerners couldn't do it. And at 7-Eleven, like, there'd be a bunch of Japanese boys hanging out, talking, and we'd roll up and talk to them, and they'd all be squatting in a circle, like 8 guys just sitting there, some of them with cigarettes, and they'll just chill in a squat. And they'll talk for like an hour or two. And they're totally comfortable just sitting.
It almost makes you think of like a semi-fetal position, but with a squat. Because they wrap their arms around their legs, right? And
or they lean sideways, and they just look comfortable as can be. No strain, no nothing. Because they have full range of motion. In the bottom of the squat, you are resting. You're at rest. Blood flows nice if you have mobility, right?
Yeah.
And so they would sit there. And so we would try to hang out with them, and we'd try to squat, and we're up on our toes, and it'd burn and take all the muscle you had. And I was like, okay, I got to develop a squat to survive this country. I started to try to stretch and get to where I could keep my heels on the floor. And the other thing that we did was we would kneel all the time on tatami mats. I got to the point where I could kneel for 40 minutes and I'd be fine. But when I first tried to kneel, my legs would burn and hurt within 2 minutes. I'd lose all circulation. So all this is just to say that in the West, we sit all the time. It is causing a lot of negative side effects. And I want to get into that today to try to stress the importance of overcoming this situation. I'm going to go ahead and read from the book called Desk Bound. The book is by Kelly Starrett, the same individual who wrote The Supple Leopard and who I've referenced before on some of this body health. And the subtitle, Brent, is Standing Up to a Sitting World. Nice, huh?
Oh, it's just one big dad joke.
Standing up to a sitting world. And it's true. Like, let me just start with the introduction here. You've already heard that sitting is the new smoking. While this may sound like ridiculously overblown media hype, the author of the phrase isn't backing down. He is Dr. James Levine, director of the Mayo Clinic, Arizona State University Obesity Solutions Initiative, and he'll even go further. He says sitting is more dangerous than smoking, kills more people than HIV, and is more treacherous than parachuting. He concludes simply, we are sitting ourselves to death.
Do you think we should stand up for a little bit, Brian? Like, I'm getting real
I know, I feel like
self-conscious.
I'm just, in honor of this discussion, I'm just going to get here on my knees like this and get out of this chair.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing.
He continues, the doctor isn't the lone alarmist. Dr. Levine and a swiftly growing number of experts backed by a mountain of research argue that sitting for as little as 2 continuous hours increases the risk of heart disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cancer, back and neck pain, and other orthopedic problems. Sitting will shorten your life, just like smoking. Many studies are also demonstrating that the effects of long-term sitting aren't reversible through exercise or other good habits. This means that if you eat well and work out religiously for an hour a day, but then sit for almost all or most of your other waking hours, the sitting behavior will chip away or even cancel out the benefits of all your exercise at the gym. You are still considered a sedentary person. Some experts argue that sitting is even more pernicious than smoking. An Australian study conducted in 2008 reports that every hour of television watched after age 25 reduces the viewer's life expectancy by 21.8 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, so for every hour of TV you watch, you lose 1/3 of that future hour.
That seems
brutal.
a little...
Let's just continue. By comparison, smoking a single cigarette reduces life expectancy by 11 minutes. Dr. Levine claims that for every hour we sit, we lose 2 hours of life. It's extreme.
Yeah, those numbers seem a little high.
The typical seated office worker has more musculoskeletal injuries than any other industry sector worker, including construction, metal industry, and transportation workers. One researcher's conclusion, sitting is as much an occupational risk as lifting heavy weights on the job. So I got to say, I did construction for years. I owned a roofing company and a siding company. I ran that for years. I did lots of manual labor, worked at the bakery. I worked at the paper mill in union jobs. I did a lot of physical work throughout my 20s, my teens and early 20s. Then after 8 years of being in a desk job, I was wrecked in a way I never was wrecked from all the previous stuff. The slip disc, all these issues, I'm like, why? All the back problems, low back problems. It wasn't because of the construction jobs. In fact, I felt better in those jobs. I was tired a lot, but my body was fine. Mm-hmm. Versus the desk job, it wrecked me. So I'll continue. For the past 2 decades, doctors and research scientists have been studying the deadly impact of sitting too much. The media has more recently caught up to name the issue a public health crisis because of the broad body of evidence linking sedentary behavior to a wide range of negative health outcomes. Today, the World Health Organization ranks physical inactivity, sitting too much, as the 4th biggest preventable killer globally, causing an estimated 3.2 million deaths annually. In just the last 20 years, the simple act of sitting has leapfrogged to the top of the health killer charts globally. So he has a diagram here that shows the ramifications of sitting. It's pretty interesting, but he says, you're sitting while eating breakfast. You're sitting on the way to work. You're sitting at work. You're sitting in front of a computer. You're sitting while eating dinner. You're sitting while slouched over a phone. You're sitting in front of the TV. You're sitting in front of your video game console, right? You're sitting a lot when you add up the hours. So he says, how do we make sense of this and fix it? The answer is simple. Unless we are asleep, we human beings are designed to move. Our normal physiology depends on this important fact. We evolved a central nervous system to sense changes around us and to move us through our environment. For nearly 200,000 years, Homo sapiens spent the majority of their time on the move. If they wanted something to eat, they had to hunt for it or dig it up out of the ground. If they wanted to travel, they had to get there by foot. All the movement that surrounded survival might sound exhausting to us now, but that activity shaped our body's design, both internally and externally. Our bodies are built for movement, And in turn, movement keeps our bodies healthy. It is a symbiotic relationship that has allowed our species to survive. We're meant to move. I mean, that's basically, in a nutshell, if you look at human history, it's not until the advent of technology and even agriculture and advanced society that we're able to do the things that we do. Our bodies are not adapted to this. Our bodies are meant to go and move all day long. And you can feel it when you go on a backpacking hunt and you've got to get your food, your water, your shelter. There's very little time spent where you're not moving. And so if our bodies have evolved in that way, and now we're sitting here for extended periods of time, sitting in front of a TV screen or a computer screen, we are not equipped for that. Our bodies are not made for that. Continuing, the problem with evolution is that it has no foresight. It couldn't predict the invention of the chair. In the beginning, this simple four-legged piece of furniture didn't have a notable impact on human health. For most people, it was little more than a place to rest after a hard day in the field or a factory. Fast forward to the 21st century, in an astonishingly short period, the citizens of the developed nations of the world have become almost completely sedentary. From the way we shop and travel to the way we work and play, today Americans spend an average of 13 hours a day sitting. 13 hours a day sitting. We never did that prior to this century. Never. So you're talking about, the blink of an eye in terms of human existence, where we've sat that much. Of course, it's going to have negative impact on our bodies.
13 hours a day. That's crazy.
Add it up, bro. How much have you sat today versus walked around and moved?
I mean, I walked around for maybe 20 minutes while I got ready to come over here.
And then
I've been sitting for 4 hours.
It's 4 hours. You're 4 hours into your day. You've been sitting. And here's the thing that I realize, and he's going to get into this as we dive deeper into the book and into what he has to say. I was like, well, I'm young. I smash the gym for an hour or two, and then I play basketball a couple nights a week, 4 nights a week, and I hike and I do all these things. And I thought, okay, if I sit for 10 hours but exercise, I can undo or still be really healthy. Mm-hmm. It didn't work. And he goes more into this situation. It does not work. You cannot undo the kind of sitting that we're doing today. You got to change your day to day. You got to stop sitting. You can't do that. I haven't had a sitting desk for 8 years or 9 years. Once the desk-chair combination became the cultural norm in the workplace, other sitting-based innovations followed. The intercom allowed office workers to communicate without getting up from their chairs. The TV set seduced people of all ages into passive leisure time activity. In the 1950s, when cars had become affordable to the general public and the interstate highway system was developed, people began flocking to the suburbs, and the commuter culture was kickstarted. Then, of course, came the computer, and our fate as sedentary creatures was sealed. We had become desk-bound. We're not evolved for being desk-bound. So he says, the Surgeon General's first report on physical inactivity and health was published in 1996. Similar to the Surgeon General's 1964 report on tobacco, it illuminated the broad body of evidence linking sedentary behavior to a wide range of negative health outcomes. The problem with sitting is that it seems so innocent and natural. Our bodies easily bend into that shape, so how could it be bad for us? Of course, if we sat with perfect posture for 15 minutes and then spent the rest of our waking hours moving, then the short stint of sitting wouldn't be bad for us. But sitting is like eating potato chips. Rarely do we do it in moderation. When we sit for long periods, the muscles in our lower bodies literally turn off and become inactive. Simultaneously, we automatically adopt positions that don't utilize the critical muscles and connective tissues that stabilize and support our trunk and spine. The result is compromised body function, and it causes a multitude of common and pernicious orthopedic problems like back and neck dysfunction, carpal tunnel syndrome, and pelvic floor dysfunction. When we travel around the world to teach and consult, we always start by asking the audience members to raise their hands if they are not in pain. Invariably, only 5 to 10% of every room, and this includes diverse groups like corporate office workers, members, and the military, professional athletes, and even children, they all raise their hands. This means that 90 to 95% of the people we work with are in pain. We believe that one of the root causes of the widespread self-reported pain is too much sitting. Sitting too much is not just shortening our lives and causing us pain, it's costing us. The Centers for Disease Control reports that we are spending 75 cents of every healthcare dollar on chronic conditions linked to sedentary behavior like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. According to the National Institutes of Health, back pain affects 8 of 10 people in their lifetime, and it is the leading cause of disability worldwide. 8 out of 10 people have back pain.
I believe that. I know more people with back pain than without.
I agree. In the United States alone, we spend almost $1 billion treating back pain and $20 billion in employer costs treating carpal tunnel annually.
My wife works for a chiropractor, and they probably see about 30 to 40 people a day. It's a rotating door. He's doing well.
The indirect costs are even higher once we consider lost work days and decreased productivity. And these figures are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we are spending to fix our ailing sedentary bodies. If you're like most people, you might find this somewhat hard to believe. You might suspect that we are blowing things out of proportion. But the evidence continues to mount that sitting too much is terrible for us. If our brains worked differently and we could vividly recall the normal feelings of childhood, running, jumping, and crawling without pain or restriction, then we might view what we as adults consider normal with more disdain. We might go searching a little harder for the cause of our suffering. We don't, though, because in our sedentary world, the actual cause of pain or sickness can be very elusive, and assigning blame can be difficult. If a beaver chews away at a tree for 9 days straight, and then a mild breeze knocks the tree over, what caused the tree to fall? Sure, the wind finished the job, but without the beaver's long hours of arduous work, the tree would have been just fine. When it comes to many modern ailments, our sedentary lifestyle is the hard-working beaver that weakens our bodies and primes us for pain and disease. It's time we stand up to our sitting world. What do you think, Brent?
I think there's a lot of things in our society today that are pretty messed up that people don't even realize. Mm-hmm. One thing that kind of freaked me out was my landlord's kid. She's like 8. She asked to see my pinkies.
Your pinkies?
My pinkies. If you take your pinkies, go ahead, and put them side by side, is there a dent in one of them?
I don't know what you mean. No.
What hand do you hold your phone in more? Your right or your left?
My right.
And if you look at your right, do you see a little bit more of a dip in that one than in your other one?
Not really.
I totally do. I swoop my finger underneath my phone, and my pinky almost holds my phone solely. So if you look at my pinkies, you can see right there a shelf for me holding my phone chronically. Yeah. Stuff like that. Like, sitting is so bad for us. Being on our phones all the time. Yeah, that freaked me out. Now you want to look at your pinky all the time.
Definitely there's a difference in the hand that holds the phone.
There is. And so, because like I've known about standing desks for a long time, and like he spouts a lot of alarming numbers. But once I saw that my pinky was physically dented because I have a phone in my hand all the time, like I need to put my phone down more. I need to stand more. I just need, like, thank heavens I have a dog.
Well, I think recognizing that there's a problem is step one.
Yes.
Like acknowledging that sitting is causing some major problems. And the thing is people are over here getting their backs worked on. They're doing the McKenzie method, like I just mentioned.
Or surgery.
They're doing surgery. They're doing all these things. And like he said, like the beaver, they're not addressing the actual root cause. That's why I always go back to movement patterns. If you move your body correctly and healthily, then there's not these downstream effects later on. If you do a squat properly, if you went under load with a bar, if you do a deadlift, if you do a pull-up, these things are basic body mechanical movements that the body's meant to be able to do. And if you do them right, then
they're painless.
They're painless, and there's a lot less inflammation or soreness that's caused from the movement. If you do them wrong and you repeat that movement over and over and over again, eventually the system breaks down. And again, going back to movement patterns, sitting in a chair all day is an unhealthy movement pattern.
I would say there's no movement.
Right.
It's anti-movement.
And it causes so many problems. I couldn't fix my back pain until I had the standing desk. I couldn't fix my back pain. Didn't matter what I did. I had to quit sitting. I rode the bus, like I said, for 2 years just so I could stand on my way to work. Even a few minutes of sitting would set me back. Okay. I had to drastically change my lifestyle to get away from the sitting. And I haven't sat since, really. You've seen me work. Everyone sees me work. I do it standing because it's vital.
Everyone comments on it.
They do. There's
not a single person that comes in and sees you at your standing desk and is like, what are you doing?
Well, and people wrote in on that podcast we did saying, like, I can't stand for 15 minutes before my feet hurt and my back hurts and I'm exhausted.
You don't cold turkey and start going at a standing desk.
You do if the pain is severe.
True.
In your back, and sitting just sets you back. You know, I get to where I was fairly mobile, and then 2 hours of sitting, and I would have 2 days of back pain that I have to work through.
Yep.
So that kept me real honest. You know?
I had a good friend who got in a car accident. He got T-boned by some guy, and he had to go through a lot of therapy. And I remember taking him to his therapist because he couldn't drive.
Right.
And the therapist saying, you need to stand as much as possible.
Yeah.
You know, don't sit ever if you can help it. And he's like, but I can't. Like, I can't stand. It hurts. And he's like, well, if you sit, it's going to hurt. So you can stand and hurt and heal, or you can sit and hurt and not heal. Choice is yours.
Well, the thing about standing, one of the things that I noticed was, yes, I could stand. First of all, I took my shoes off. Typically, if you are dressed like I was in some kind of dress shoe, you know, you've got slacks and business casual or something on.
Nice silk shirt.
Yeah. Then you really needed to get those shoes off because there's not a pair in the world that's, you know, you've got like a 1-inch heel in the back and no cushion. You know, loafers are not, they're not good for you.
Yeah. They're not.
So,
they're terrible.
I would take my shoes off, so I was barefoot. I also think that's good because the body's meant to be barefoot. And I did get a little bit of a padded floor for one side and then the hard floor on the other. So I could move that pad left and right. It was just a little pad so that I could stand on a softer surface and then a hard surface, and I would alternate throughout the day.
What's the purpose behind that? Is there something that your muscles are doing unconsciously?
Yeah, because the body, you know, think about it. If you were an Aboriginal human being and you were walking in, let's say,
anywhere,
it's not even. It's
You're
not even.
on concrete.
The ground is always now. If you were to walk on an extremely flat, hard surface like concrete all day long, every day, your foot's not built for that.
No.
So having a softer surface, and they have those gel pad type mats for people to stand on. But I found it was more about changing it. So you went from padded to hard to padded to hard throughout the day, just as my foot got fatigued or started to get a little sore.
I worked at some warehouses, and it's all concrete. And I would notice my feet would hurt standing out there on the concrete more than anything else. The
concrete doesn't give it all.
No.
And so it just isn't like the real world. So I had that. And then what I would do also is, at first, I had a goal to stand for 40 minutes and then sit for 5. And stand for 40 minutes, sit for 10. Stand for 40 minutes, sit for 5. I would just kind of give my feet a little break, but they were tired and my legs were tired.
It sounds like circuit training.
It just hurt. Like it did. My legs got really tired for a few months until I had the stamina where I could stand all day. And today I still have that. Like I can stand all day. I can stand endlessly. It doesn't bother me at all. And it's funny because people will come in, even when I worked at the insurance company, and people would come into my office to have a meeting. There was no chair. I didn't have a chair because you know why? I kept my meetings real short. People would walk in, they'd look around for a chair, and I'd be like, we don't have chairs in my office. And then we would have a meeting. 10 minutes in, they're like looking for a chair. Like it is pathetic how short people can standing up.
But I find that, like, if you're at a social thing or an event, maybe you're at a bonfire, maybe you're just at work hanging out with someone, people can stand and talk in a circle.
Now, let's back that up a little bit because that goes into the next point. There's a big difference between standing and not moving and walking. The body's built to walk. The body's shift weight back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's fine. But standing, people, when they're standing around in those circles, they're walking, they're moving, they're shifting their weight. They're not just standing. They're not.
So do you think, like, if I got a lazy Susan and put it onto a desk, that would be the best of both worlds?
What I did was I just stepped left, right. For hours, it's like I'm walking. I would literally walk to the left, to the right while I'm typing. I just moved my weight and shifted and walked all day long while I'm at the computer. Literally, if you're watching, I would just stand here like this, walk away from the computer, back to the computer, move my mouse, shift, move around. I just never stopped moving. It was so much less fatigue.
People must have thought you were like the office psychopath.
They knew how much emphasis. They knew that I had the back problem for a long time and that I had healed it. And then I got really strong, like to where I could deadlift, 450 pounds. That's.
I do notice that if I do a deadlift and then if I sit all day, I'm screwed for like 4 days afterwards.
That is the worst.
No
to
amount of
do
stretching,
a deadlift
no
and then
amount of
sit for
rolling.
12 hours the next day, that will wreck me even now.
Yeah.
That's why I don't do any kind of deadlift type exercises or kettlebell swings or any of that if I'm going to travel the next day.
Yeah, sitting in a car is also like
or an airplane. It's the worst. So I usually try to not do any sort of back movements, or maybe it's just upper body workout type thing.
Or some cardio.
2 or 3 days before I know I'm going to go somewhere, because to get all those muscles broken down and sore and then to sit, maybe he says in the book what the issue is.
It destroys me.
So that's another thing I did. Like I said, is I moved back and forth, shoes off. I had the pad. I would walk back and forth. I would sit briefly for a few minutes when I first started, because it was too fatiguing to stand just the whole time. So those are some of the things I did to adjust to the standing desk.
Did you use a lacrosse ball?
Yes, I had a lacrosse ball that was on the floor 24/7, and I would just roll my foot on it every hour or two or 15 minutes. Just constantly rolling my foot all over that lacrosse ball. Yeah.
I love lacrosse balls on the feet. At some point, you'll hit a knot or something, and it's as good as sex. It's great stuff.
No, it's not, but it is nice. I would lay on the floor, and I would use that lacrosse ball on my hip or my hip flexors and on my low back, and I would – we lost Trevor. We have intern Trevor here right now behind the scenes, folks. We'll talk about Trevor later. We'll introduce you. But anyway, I would use the lacrosse ball or the foam roller in my office area every day throughout the day, along with the McKenzie method, back push-ups, and things like that.
What about like doing like some kind of a Captain Morgan stance?
So that's the final thing. Brent, you're like a mind reader. So Kelly Starrett talks about this. When you go to a bar, which I really honestly haven't spent much time in them, but one of the things when you're at a bar, let's say you're at a bar at Buffalo Wild Wings, okay? And you're standing there at a bar. Do you know what they have on a bar?
A bar?
They have the foot bar at the bottom. Do you know what that's for?
Putting your feet up?
No.
No? It's for keeping the chairs from bumping against it?
No.
I'm at a loss.
When you're standing, it puts pressure on your low back when you're standing forever. And if you raise your foot just a little bit and do the Captain Morgan pose, basically, it instantly relieves that low back pressure and the locking of your low back. So right next to my standing desk, I had a little footstool. And then I would put my right leg up on that footstool, and it would instantly release all that pressure on my low back. And then I would switch to the other foot as well. And so throughout the day, I'm just moving. I'm moving back and forth. I'm standing still on one leg, standing still on the other leg. I'm rolling out with the lacrosse ball. I have my shoes off, hard floor, soft floor. It just changed the game. When I got home, I'd have a standing desk there as well. Another thing I like to do is lay on my stomach, kind of like in that cobra, yoga pose or the McKenzie method pose, where my back is curved backward. And I'll work on my computer sometimes for an hour or two, laying on my stomach, like that. And that puts my back in that reverse bend, back bend, instead of, in the forward position that you find yourself in very often.
Yeah.
You look at a lot of the exercises, it's very rare that you put your back in, like even if you do a CrossFit WOD, most of it's all forward motion up to neutral, but none of it goes backward. And so spending time in that backward position, like in the McKenzie method where you stretch back like that, it's vital, I think.
Someone asked us a question about back bends. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, somebody asked about doing those backbend exercises.
Or back extensions.
Back extensions. I don't anticipate that they're that wonderful. I'm sure they don't hurt, but I don't see them as game changers.
I don't know if because normally you do those with a weight, like you have like a 25.
For those who don't know, it's you get into if you know what a GHD sit up is, basically you lock your legs into
a machine,
into something, and you're on a ledge, and then you can hyperextend your back either forward or backward, depending if you're facing forward in that position or you're facing to the sky. And you can do sit-ups that extend way past neutral, or you can do back extensions that do the same thing. You can look it up, a back extension, if you don't know what it is. I think that deadlifts and squats are of far more value and overhead.
I would agree.
Holding up weight overhead is more valuable. I don't think that it hurts to do sit-ups and to do back extensions. I did those for a long time, and I think early on maybe that's a really helpful move, but there was no replacement for my core stability. There's no amount of sit-ups and GHD and body weight kind of crunches and back extensions that could do what deadlifting did for my back.
It took me a long time to be able to do a deadlift, because the first couple times I did deadlifts, it almost threw my back out. Like it hurt.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure because I was doing them wrong.
Yeah.
But once I kind of figured it out and started doing it, deadlifts are my favorite. I wish I could do deadlifts 3 or 4 times a week.
Good mornings and deadlifts, I think those do a lot more for your back, but you got to do them the right way. And too many people go into the gym and they have the worst form on the planet, and you're not actually building the muscles you think you're building. You're working the wrong muscles because your form is wrong. You want to work your back. You do. So you're not trying to squat the bar into a standing position. You know, our dad was like, lift with your legs, lift with your legs. Except if you're doing the deadlift, the whole point is to do a deadlift.
Yeah.
Lift with your back and your posterior chain. You're supposed to use your glutes and your hams to lift the weight along with your back. You know, if you have a flat back that's straight and you squat down and pick up the bar and you just pick it up, you know, from a squat position, you just kept your back neutral and you just did a squat. Basically, from that dead position, you're breaking down way more muscle fiber. It wrecks muscle fiber.
Yeah.
Where a squat, because of the way that you load, you go down, you load those ligaments and tendons, and then you come back up, you don't rip muscle tissue the same way. And so you heal a lot faster from a squat than you can a deadlift because of the eccentric, concentric
I can
issue.
squat way more. I can squat heavy 3 times a week.
Right.
Easy. Maybe 4 or 5 sometimes if
And
I'm
that's
really
why
pushing.
you can't do that with a deadlift. That's one reason why one of the things that happens a lot in, say, a CrossFit workout is you might clean the bar and then drop it. Clean the bar and drop it instead of lowering the bar.
Yeah.
Because the lowering of the bar actually tends to break down more muscle tissue than the lifting of the bar. So the healing process is longer.
Yeah.
So if you cut out the lowering of the bar in the exercise and you just throw on tons of volume of lifting the bar, okay, you get most of the benefits from the exercise
With less time
with
out.
far less time away and far less soreness and recovery time required.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I was just told that it's not really super beneficial to lower the bar, so I've always just dropped the bar.
Well, no, there's a lot of value in lowering the bar, but it just depends on your training goals, how much time you have. If you want the stimulus of the workout without a lot of the downside,
Yeah.
you know, you can cram in a lot more volume and more training benefit by dropping the bar instead.
Normally I've dropped the bar unless like I'm at some Globo gym and people really don't like it when I drop the bar.
I think it's really useful. I think it's important to do both because, you know, when I'm in the mountains and I heave a backpack up, I'm not just going to drop it.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to lower it down. I want the strength to lower the weight as much as I have the strength to lift the weight. I need both. But
Fine.
But I don't need to do it every single workout. I might really, because I don't want to be that sore or take that long to recover, and I want to work out the next day and the next day too.
You got other plans.
So I might change it, you know. So pull up is similar too, because you're from a dead hang, and you got to initiate the pull.
Pull-ups.
But a push-up, okay, a lot of times you start in the upward position and you go down, and you kind of spring back up. So again, it's not from a dead position. You're loading and pushing. It's different.
I tend to stay away from pull-ups. I got a weird body shape. I got some muscles that are missing. And even when I'm not super fat and have extra body weight, it just tends to pull my shoulder out.
You're going to be able to do really heavy external loading because of your body weight.
Mm-hmm.
Thorpe Johnson,
Or Bjorkson.
whatever his name is, the Mountain.
Yeah.
He's going to have trouble with pull-ups.
This is
okay?
true.
But he can lift, 1,200 pounds or something deadlift? I don't remember what it was the other day.
Someone just
Stupid.
out deadlifted him and set a new world record. And he's a short dude. He's like 5'10".
But he just redid a new world record.
Did he?
I don't know who's
They're just
ahead,
going
but
back and forth.
The point is, it's ridiculous. There's pros and cons to size.
Yeah.
You know?
Truett's going to try and beat Goggins' pull-up record here.
I know. He challenged me to 10 for 10 today. And he did a 40-pound chain around his neck when he did his 10 pull-ups the other day.
Psychopath.
I'm supposed to go do mine. There's a weight vest in there. I was like, 40 pounds, though, for 10 reps. I don't know. Maybe.
Let's go find out.
Truett made it look like he could do more. I can make it look like I could do more, though, but I won't be able to. But I might be able to make it look like I can.
Yeah. That's what matters.
Okay, I'm going to get back to the book real quick, and then we're going to wrap this show up. We'll dive into it some more. We appreciate your questions on YouTube. That really helps us fine-tune the information that we're giving, answer questions on follow-up podcasts. So if this is useful to you, keep asking away. Early on in Kelly's career as a physical therapist and strength and conditioning coach, he came to understand that in order to be effective at his job, he needed to play the role of observer. The first thing he noticed was that an unusual number of people were in pain, operating under the assumption that our joints are designed to last 110 years and that a human being's natural resting state is pain-free. He was dumbfounded as to why so many people were in utter agony in their 30s and even their 20s. To get to the bottom of this issue, we needed to analyze our modern lifestyle as a whole, figure out what was causing the greatest harm to our bodies, and then find unobtrusive ways to mitigate those noxious influences. Well, when we opened a strength and conditioning center in 2005, we had the chance to observe a great many people. Since the doors opened, we've worked with the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, and NHL. Dozens of Division I university programs, MMA fighters, extreme athletes, ballet dancers, elite cyclists, Olympians, every branch of the military, including their elite soldiers, and even A-list Hollywood actors. We've also worked with weekend warriors, desk jockeys, and children. While our job was to focus on individual clients and their unique pain, we started noticing a common thread. Even after we corrected mechanical technique problems and or range of motion, flexibility issues, and restrictions, many of our clients continued to have problems excelling at their sport or job. In 2007, we were consulting with a Division I football program. We had been asked to help them figure out why, despite a focus on proper training and injury prevention, they were still seeing an alarming injury rate and lost power output. The athletes were also reporting a high rate of low back and lower extremity pain, which was alarming to the coaches. We evaluated the program and found that they were doing all the right things. They had an excellent strength and conditioning program and a keen understanding of the importance of mechanics and range of motion. Their athletes were dedicated and hardworking, and they had an excellent and thoughtful coaching staff. When we dug deeper, we discovered that outside of practice, the athletes were spending 12 to 14 hours a day sitting. Let us repeat. Division I college football players were sitting for almost all of their waking hours, except when they were actually playing or practicing. Dude, I think that's the norm, man. So what does that mean? They sat in class, they sat during team meetings, sat in the cafeteria, sat on the couch, and so on. All of this sitting led to two problems. It left very little time for physical activity, and the athletes were stuck in compromised positions for the majority of the day. We had discovered our elephant in the room. We started calling this phenomena innocuous environmental load. We use this term to describe seemingly harmless aspects of the environment that place compromising stressors on the body and can hinder physiology and basic life functionality. For example, if you have a newborn baby at home, you're probably not sleeping very well. This is an environmental load or stressor that is impacting the quality of your existence. Lack of sleep is an easy way to diagnose because those clients who suffer from it have bags under their eyes and often proclaim, "The baby kept me up all night." The solution is simple. Get more sleep and you'll perform better. But not all environmental loads are so easy to pinpoint. Digging deeper and deeper into our clients' lives outside the gym, we started to realize that those who were hitting the biggest roadblocks had a unifying thread. They all spent a great deal of time sitting. Even when we corrected their mechanics in the gym over and over again, we had to solve the same set of physical problems related to sitting. Tight hips, low back and neck pain, shoulder restrictions. The list goes on and on. It would have made more sense if these were prototypical unhealthy people, but many of them were top-notch athletes who trained regularly, slept an adequate amount, managed their life stress, and ate well. Their bodies should have been well-oiled machines, yet they couldn't overcome the environmental load of sitting. The true impact on the body that sitting can have became more evident to us when we began working with elite military aircraft pilots. Though they were well-trained tactical athletes, their bodies were a mess. Think about what these pilots go through on a typical day. In addition to facing high-stress situations from a seated position, they experience insane G-forces, oscillate up and down, and wear heavy helmets, and the seat forces their shoulders forward into an ergonomically poor rounded position. Just as with our clients in the gym, we saw all the familiar problems that go along with prolonged sitting, but intensified and accelerated disc and neck herniation, numbness and tingling chronic pain. And when they crawled out of their planes and tried to get on with the other aspects of their life, not only did they suffer from pain, but their mobility and performance also were affected. Our bodies are designed to handle serious abuse, but like everything else, the human body has its limits, and at every turn, our chair-centric culture pushes those limits, which compels us to ask a very important question. Where did we go wrong? So I really wanted to dive into this podcast and start it off, this topic, with basically convincing you that sitting's bad. Mm-hmm. Right?
Convinced.
Convinced? Are you?
Yes. I might have been somewhat pre-convinced, but you have now thrown plenty of statistics at me, and I'm a little scared. I'm thinking about ripping out my toilet and putting a hole in the floor.
Or get a squatty potty.
They're only like $20.
I know.
They're super cheap.
I know.
My family, guess what you're getting for Christmas?
I really wanted to just stress the importance, the issue of this back, body, low extremity, all these pains that you're experiencing. Think about what he's saying here, because a lot of people I've mentioned, I keep telling them sitting is bad. Sitting is bad. Mm-hmm. Look, you sit too much. You sit more than you think. And the response is, but I exercise all the time. Mm-hmm. I go to the gym. I do all this stuff. Well, look, you have some of the best athletes in the world that he's talking about that exercise far more often than us. And they still sit 8 to 12 hours a day, and they're still wrecked. That's why on the podcast I talked about how I fixed a slipped disc. You can't talk about how you fix the slipped disc if you don't also talk about the fact that you quit sitting. Like you literally stopped sitting.
I think everyone has that one super unhealthy thing that they just refuse to give up. Like you might have someone who runs marathons, does all sorts of healthy eating most of the time.
Yeah.
But they eat like 4 or 5 Snickers at the end of every day because it calms them down.
Right.
And then they have like high blood pressure or whatever. They have no teeth because they're cavity ridden or whatever.
Right.
Like, everyone has that one thing. And I think for a lot of people, especially the super healthy people, sitting is it. It's like when you try to tell people, try to eat less grains and don't eat any bread.
Right.
I can't live without my bread.
It's similar in the sense that I always tell people, you can't just take in more fish and fish oil.
Yeah, omega-3s.
Omega-3s. You have to actually limit your intake of omega-6 at the same time. Mm-hmm. You can't just compensate.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And it's the same thing. You can't just compensate for all those hours sitting. You've got to eliminate those hours sitting. That was the whole point today. We'll get deeper into this as we continue to talk about, getting healthier, getting stronger, fixing these aching knees or backs that people are experiencing. We'll get into more about how did we get here with all the sitting and the pain that we're experiencing because of it. And then we'll get into the things that we can do to fix it. Mm-hmm. And we'll also get into the details of what sitting does to you. We've established that it's a problem, but specifically, what does it do to your back? And how has it caused the problem? Because if you want to undo some things caused by all that sitting, you kind of need to understand how you got there. That's why that McKinsey method and being in the back extension position is such a critical piece. I spent so much time in a forward position on my back. And to say for every hour you spend in a forward position, you need to spend an hour in the back position.
It's a lot of work.
That's a lot of commitment. Mm-hmm. But you go back to David Goggins and where we covered his stretching routine. 12 hours a day he stretched to get his life back. And he did a few in the morning, some in the afternoon, some throughout the day, and then 4 or 5 hours when he got home. Okay? You can't just undo years of wrecking yourself in an hour, a half hour of commitment a day.
How many people have lost the ability to go into a squat? 90% of the Western world.
Yeah. And
how long does it take them to get that mobility back in their hips and in their ankles?
So much of that varies, but you can see someone, it can take them 2 years to get into it of dedication. And some can get there in a few months.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
It probably took me a good year to be able to get down into a real squat position.
Dude, I had so much shoulder impingement and no shoulder mobility. Like I couldn't reach behind and touch between my shoulder blades. I couldn't put my hands behind my back like this and touch my hands. Literally, I couldn't do this. And I couldn't straighten my arms like that. I couldn't touch my hands together. Like literally, I was like this. And I was like, oh, and I bend my arms and get my hands together.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That's when I started doing P90X, when I started to try to get my back in shape. I couldn't reach behind my and grab. That's how jacked up and tight my shoulders had been.
Wow.
And then I started doing, everything through CrossFit, and I started doing Olympic rings. And when I do skin the cat, the ice cream or shaker or whatever, I did these exercises on the rings under load over time that gave me a lot of shoulder mobility. And then pull-ups combined with that, proper pull-ups, like gymnastic style, strict pull-ups. All those movements have restored so much mobility and strength in my body. And I rarely have the soreness and the pain that other people my age have. But I earned it over time with correct movement and stretching and mobility work. So it can be done. It's just a process, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Worth it. You can age really well. You can age really poorly.
Yes.
Right now we got the COVID-19 thing going on. And there are a lot of people that are going into this with poor health, and they're going, man, if it's killing everybody that's out of shape and over 50, maybe I should have been in shape, as best I could. So you're ready for these things. The other thing is not just physical readiness, which is important. So you're resilient against something like this pandemic. But it also has got people thinking about like preparedness in terms of what are my finances like? Can I handle 2 or 3 months, 4 months of no income? When you have 3 to 6 months of expenses and no debt, you're not worried about this recession thing.
You just got a vacation at that point.
Because I prepared my life for it. The same is true with having your home supplied. We're hunters. I have 2 freezers
full of meat
and bone marrow and other foods. And then we have lots of canned goods, and we preserve our fruits and vegetables and things. And we've got food, and I didn't have to go shop for anything. It's like, oh, okay, we'll just live on what we have. That's cool.
I know everyone snapped and bought toilet paper, and I just don't understand. I've never personally tried to eat toilet paper, so maybe I'm missing out.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know what that was all about. People are afraid they wouldn't be able to. I mean, think about it.
Brian, there are so many alternatives to wiping your butt. There's not a lot of alternatives to food.
Food, I know.
Like you have to. It's either food or it's not food.
I don't know. It's a bizarre thing, I thought. Yeah, people crying because there was no toilet paper.
Well, a bunch of people went and bought toilet paper with the intent of
selling it?
Reselling it, yeah.
Right. The hoarders.
And it didn't work well for them. And then Costco and all those big box stores put a no return policy on them. So people went and bought a crap ton of toilet paper for no good reason.
So, folks, that's it for today's podcast. Support us by going out there and subscribing to the newsletter. Support us by using the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops to save if you got some orders and products you want to get at Mountain Ops. We have some deals with Heather's Choice, 15% right there. And I'm surprised more people didn't go and buy like Heather's Choice kind of meals for this period of time when, because it's like food storage kind of thing. But get yourself some packaroons, some backcountry food, great blend of macros and quality nutrition. It's good stuff. Also, our partners at Sissy Sticks, you can save 15% off on those trekking poles. Seek Outside, you get 5% off a Seek Outside shelter. I've said this before. If you're on a budget, I recommend the Silex. It's $200. I recommend the medium U-turn stove or the Cub stove, titanium. The stove is around $250 to $300, and the tent is around $200. Get one, get the other one later. I think you should step up to the stove at some point because it's the cat's meow.
Deal, man. Like,
and the whole thing is like
is.
2 pounds, 2/3 ounces,
It's
or
under
2/3 pound or something. It's less than 3 pounds.
It's just so hard to beat. After having a tent or a stove in my tent, I don't think I will ever go back.
It's really hard to go back.
And
then if you get wet, you can dry out your gear. The Dyneema Cimarron tent weighs about the same and gives you way more space.
Yeah.
But it's also like $1,000, I think. Somewhere in, I don't know. Check it out. It's expensive.
But you can save 5% using the Go Gritty.
But yes, you can. And the medium U-turn stove, it can be used in any of those tents.
Yep.
So the stove can go from tent to tent. So I think you might want to go with a little bit larger stove if you go with one of those giant, one of the bigger teepees. But the Cimarron is that ideal size.
Yeah.
And so check that out. Check out Graxaw game bags and Valkyrie arrows for some sick, incredibly lethal broadheads. It's like having a top-notch titanium stainless steel like knife steel. Like a really expensive Benchmade knife, like stuck on the
a
end,
lightsaber on the end of that,
like
thing,
on
dude.
the end of your arrow shaft. You're talking a whole different level. My cousin Ben shot his into a concrete wall, pulled it out, perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm into them because I don't want to be super picky about my shot placement. I just want to know that my arrow is going to go through no matter where I put it.
Well, with a draw length like yours and a poundage like yours, and with new bows and the heavy arrow like this, you pretty much will send it through whatever you want. Yeah. When you're talking about a 500 plus grain arrow going, 290 feet per second, a 520 grain arrow,
greased up laser point,
like steel tip like that, and the bone breaking, it's unreal the way it hits a bone. It's like a needle. It's so fine. That tip hits that, and it doesn't glance left or right. It just grabs purchase. It just grabs onto that bone, and it barely goes in a little bit.
It's a wedge.
It's a wedge. Once that tip is in there, it ain't going left or right, and it just then all of a sudden all that force is going straight. The back of it swoops out like a wedge, and it just pops the bone. And the first time I saw that was when I shot that mule deer, and it went through the rib on the onside, through the body cavity, and then it went out the thickest part of the offside leg, front leg, and it exploded it like a bullet would, and the arrow just passed through no problem. You heard it. We heard it like pop, like a bone shattering pop from. It sounded like you took a bone and just smashed it with a hammer, and obliterated it. And that was a couple years back. And since then, I put it through a lot of other bones, coast to coast on that big whitetail from hip to front chest, penetrated the whole body cavity, the stomach, like everything, like butter.
That's what I'm talking about. I don't want to care about shot placement. I want to envision that exit hole and send it.
I haven't had the same blood trails sometimes because the hole isn't massive like it is on some other, but it is a coast to coast hole.
It's kind of like
with
you
3 blades,
and then the cut's so fine that you can hardly tell where you cut yourself.
Right. So it bleeds fast and dies fast, but it doesn't always squirt onto the ground.
Yeah,
I've had that issue sometimes with it, but it's really just makes the recovery a little more challenging sometimes in certain terrain or conditions. But generally, they've all died within sight. I guess if I was in Prince of Wales Island and it was super thick, it could be
raining or something.
A little bit of a challenge. That is pretty much the only weakness, and it's worth it for the trade-off. Instant death. From any shot angle. So anyway, that's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and we appreciate all the comments and support. And as always, stay gritty.